Alright guys, how's it going? Today we're going to be taking a look at the difference between mirrorless cameras and standard, or I guess old school DSLRs. I'm going to be trying to tackle some of the questions that I've heard at my work, and some, I guess, of the misconceptions about the new mirrorless cameras, and I guess the pros and cons of either system. So yeah, let's jump straight in. Let's address the difference between a mirrorless camera and a camera with a mirror in it. Basically, inside of the front of the camera body, you've got what's called a mirror box. Now that's where the light passes in through the lens, bounces off a mirror, up through a kind of prism system in the top of the camera and into your eye. Whereas with a mirrorless system, all you've got once you take that lens off is the sensor itself. Now, there are pros and cons to both of these. One of the things that you're going to want to look out for if you are going with the mirrorless system is that dust, dirt, any sort of ocean spray, whatever it is, environmental hazards, if you will, are more likely to get onto that sensor. So you're going to be up for more sensor cleans, and you're going to have to take a little bit more care when changing lenses. So just to let you know what I'm kind of basing this off of, I own a 6D, and I'm going to be referencing, I guess, to the Alpha 7 series that Sony make, just because in my opinion they are leading the mirrorless, I guess, revolution, if you will. They've got extremely powerful cameras out at the moment. Sony's doing a really great job at producing those, and I've also got over here an A7 Mark II. Really awesome camera. I'm going to be doing a review on this guy as well after I finish this video, so stick around for a link to that at the end of this vid. So I guess let's address the biggest question first. Which one's better? Now, I think if you're approaching this with that sort of mindset, then you've come to the wrong video, because it's not a matter of which is better, it's a matter of which is best for me. There are three main questions that you need to ask yourself when you're looking at either going your classic DSLR or your mirrorless system. The first thing is, where are you going? Mirrorless systems are really small. As you can see by this guy on the side, the form factor is absolutely tiny. I would argue that SLRs can be up to twice this size, depending on how far up, I guess, the spectrum you go. So if you're going places that are quite remote, or if you're going places that require you to pack tight and pack small bags, then definitely go for the mirrorless systems, because they're going to save you a lot of space. The next thing you're going to want to ask yourself is, what is my budget? So for those of you who are willing to splash out, spend a little bit more on your cameras, I would suggest definitely looking into the mirrorless systems, because things like the A7S Mark II are incredible cameras. Their low light capabilities are absolutely amazing. I think at the moment they're able to go somewhere up to about 3 million ISO or something ridiculous like that. So you can really get away with a lot if you're like a guerrilla filmmaker and you don't have access to lighting gear and things like that. And the last thing that you're going to want to ask yourself is, what is your style? How do you like to shoot? Where do you like to shoot? Are you going to be one day running this camera off of a drone underwater, things like that? Because the smaller mirrorless systems are able to be mounted on things like drones. They are able, or easier, I guess, to go in underwater housings. You can save yourself a little bit of money there. If you're the sort of person who's shooting in a studio, are you going to have access to a tripod, things like that? Because if you don't have to carry your camera all of the time, having a larger SLR might be the way to go. Or if you're the kind of person who likes a really hefty, sturdy grip to hold on to, then a standard SLR might be the way to go, because they do offer that. Whereas the mirrorless, I find, have a bit of a smaller grip and a little bit harder to hold on to. Now, another big argument, I guess, that I get all the time is, there aren't enough accessories, there aren't enough lenses, I don't know if I'm going to be able to shoot the content that I want to shoot because I'll be restricted by those things. Now, if lenses is your biggest issue, then you haven't done your research, because there are plenty of lenses out there for all of your mirrorless systems. Sony, for example, they provide I guess kind of two ranges of lenses, and then a whole other series of other really high-end gear. But two basic series of lenses, one that's a kind of consumer level and one that's like a prosumer level. And a lot of them do it. Olympus do it, Fuji do it. Fuji lenses are incredible as well. I really love the Fuji systems because of their aperture that's available on their lenses. I think that's a really nice feature. But if you don't have, or if you're not looking at getting Sony lenses or Olympus, whatever the system is, and you already have something like a Canon and Nikon, there are adapters available for whichever mount type you have. It doesn't matter if it's an old school like film lens that you want to mount onto your new camera, because there are adapters available out there. Only thing that you need to really worry about is making sure that you are aware of whether or not the autofocus on your camera is going to be compromised, and you understand the way that adapter is going to connect your lenses, because you might get little bits of aberration on wider lenses or color casting and things like that. So do your research if you're going to buy adapters. So another awesome thing about the mirrorless cameras that I really love, and especially when people are coming into my work and they're saying, you know, it's going to be my first camera, I'm really excited about it, but I don't really know a lot about photography, is that the way that the sensor is actually capturing the image and displaying it to the viewfinder and the LCD is really helpful for people who are starting out and who are learning, because what you get on that LCD screen and what you get on that viewfinder is going to be exactly accurate to the image that your camera is capturing. Whereas with a standard SLR, what you get when you look through the viewfinder is just a reflection of what's coming straight into the lens. So for people who aren't used to reading light meters, people who aren't used to balancing their cameras, if you're starting out and you're shooting in manual modes and you're not used to that kind of system, it can be a little bit jarring, especially if you've come from something like using your camera in auto and it's not something that you have to constantly worry about and constantly concentrate on. So if you're starting out and you want something that's going to be a little bit easier to learn manual on, I would definitely recommend the mirrorless cameras. And another cool thing about these is that you can easily change between the electronic viewfinder and the LCD just by bringing your eye up to the eyepiece here. And I think that for somebody like me who shoots a bit of video and also likes to shoot stills, it's quite nice to be able to go between the two without having to press buttons and change switches and do all of that stuff. So in terms of ergonomics and ease of use, I really, really love that feature. And I wish Canon and Nikon and you guys could try and adapt it in some way so that it would recognize the two, because it's just an awesome feature to have. Makes things a lot smoother and a lot easier when you're shooting. Another thing to understand is autofocus. There's a lot of, I guess, umming and ahhing about which is the better system for autofocusing, and basically they're just two different ways of operating. So with a standard or a classic DSLR, the way that those cameras autofocus is they actually have an autofocusing chip built into the camera. So the light comes through, it bounces up to your eyepiece, and it passes an autofocusing sensor, I guess. So that dedicated sensor is going to be able to find your focus very quickly and very accurately, which is why it's such a great system. Whereas with your mirrorless cameras, your light is going to be coming through the lens, landing on the imaging sensor, and that sensor is also acting as an autofocusing sensor. There's, I guess, a little bit of a debate around whether or not that changes the performance of the camera, whether it affects how quickly it's focusing, how accurately it's focusing, and in my opinion, I think it's these days quite similar. You're going to get very similar speeds out of the camera, and I mean on my 6D, the A7S or the A7R or the A7 II, whatever it is, definitely beat it. I've only got something like 9 autofocusing points on my 6D. So yeah, the mirrorless system is definitely ahead there. And for somebody like me who's doing a lot of filming work, I try to avoid using autofocus as much as possible. I also just prefer having as much control of my camera as possible. I don't like my focus kind of searching in the background and the foreground if things pass by. So being able to have that manual control is really important for me. So I've shot with both the traditional SLR and the mirrorless SLR, and I have to say that when you get to the pointy end of the stick, both devices are going to give you a very similar look. I find that Sony is the color science in Sony I really love, but I also love the warmth that I get from my Canon camera. So again, it's just about finding which one is going to work best for you. I find that putting my SLR on a shoulder rig for a long period of time, for example, can get quite heavy. So you know, little things like that you've just got to keep in mind. I have noticed as well that since these cameras, the mirrorless cameras are so much smaller, they do have to produce smaller batteries and things like that as well. So the battery life, unfortunately, on a lot of mirrorless cameras is, you know, up to 50% less life than you would get out of a larger SLR battery, just because of the sheer size difference. But fortunately, Sony have made it able for you to plug external batteries and things like that in, and I have found myself doing that a couple of times. I was on a short film recently where we literally just strapped an external battery to the outside of one of our rigs and plugged it into the side of the camera, and that was an easy fix. So I guess there are a couple of little things like that that come up, but it's about finding those creative solutions and making it work for you. So I guess that's it, guys. That's pretty much my opinion on the classic DSLR versus mirrorless cameras debate. In my opinion, you shouldn't be looking for the better camera, you should be looking at the camera that's better suited to you and what you're doing. Like I said before, those of you guys who have bigger mitts and you like something to hold onto, the old school SLRs can be a really good place for you to find something, you know, good and chunky to hold onto if you're doing, you know, a bit faster work and you've got to throw things around a bit. It can be nice to have something to hold on to if you're going hiking, traveling, if you want to mount to drones or to, you know, do underwater stuff. Not that that isn't available for larger SLRs, just that it's a bit more difficult. Then the mirrorless system could be good for you. If you're worried about accessories, don't stress, there's plenty out there. And in terms of cost, in either direction, you're going to be able to find something that's going to work for you. So it's just about educating yourself as much as possible about comparative products and finding out which one is going to best do the job for you guys.